So let me start with a question. Would it be fair to say that things felt pretty touch and go there for a little while? For maybe about a day? It's another one of those stories that we've seen so often throughout this season, this year with the Edmonton Oilers, where you pick a different week and you tell a different story. And everything just flips over and tells us a different story the next week. Completely different, almost opposite of what was going on previously. And so, a little while ago, I don't think I really need to go terribly deep into detail about it. The Edmonton Oilers came back from LA, tied at 2, and basically they needed to go into Game 5 and get a win. And then they didn't get the win in Game 5. They kind of came out and they struggled through the first couple of periods and then had to really turn it on in that third period. And yeah, they just about came up with the win, but they didn't quite get it. And at that point, the narrative, was definitely, the portents were not good for the Edmonton Oilers. It seemed like everybody in the media was talking about how crucial it was that they had to win Game 5. Because of the frequency with which any team that loses Game 5 in a tied series goes on to win that series. I don't remember the specific numbers offhand. I didn't bother to write them down, honestly. But the odds were definitely not good, and the odds were not in our favor. And there were a lot of fans, in oil country that, really seemed like they had given up. And it was all over social media, and people were saying, yeah, no, we're done, it's over, we give up. And those people underestimated 3 things. First off, they underestimated Connor McDavid. And in the two back-to-back performances after that Game 5 loss to tie that series in LA, and then come back to Edmonton and get the win in Game 7, Connor McDavid was absolutely magnificent. But he wasn't alone. The rest of the team was very, very good with him. So there's the second thing that a lot of those people underestimated, was they underestimated the Edmonton Oilers. But there's a third thing that they underestimated. And this actually, in my opinion, reflects a pretty big change in this team, and a really positive change in this team over previous years. And that was that they underestimated Ben Stelter. And so, okay, by now we all know the story of Ben Stelter. 5 years old, stricken with cancer, fighting for his life at an age that absolutely nobody should have to fight for their life at. And he has been a source of tremendous inspiration for this team this year. At one point, actually, I think it might actually still be at the point where the Edmonton Oilers have not lost a home game with Big Ben in attendance. That is a remarkable stat, and it actually flips over something that I won't lie to you, I haven't talked about it. But it was something that I had kind of started to become worried about with this team. And I think that the Edmonton Oilers have finally closed what I would call the inspiration gap. And so it's not an uncommon thing in sports for teams that have been, afflicted with very deep and personal tragedy, to draw inspiration from that, to overcome that tragedy and overcome that adversity and go on to do very big things. The world of sports is full of them. If you want a really good example in the world of hockey, look at the Detroit Red Wings and Vladimir Konstantinov. He and his teammate were out, him and Fedosov were out celebrating that Stanley Cup win, and they get in a terrible limo crash. Konstantinov's career is over. And then they come back the next year, and they draw that inspiration from Konstantinov, and that propels them to another Stanley Cup championship. So there's a good example right there. And over the last little while, the Edmonton Oilers, honestly, they haven't had a shortage of opportunities, to harness that kind of adversity and that kind of tragedy in that way. And use that inspiration to go on and do very big things. And they just didn't get them done. Maybe the most earliest recent example, 2017. So Dave Semenko, legendary Edmonton Oiler. And this one shocked even me. just how quickly this whole thing happened. You know, it comes out that he's been diagnosed with cancer. His family announces it. I don't remember exactly how far it was afterwards, but it was not long at all. Then we suddenly get, Dave Semenko was not just, diagnosed with cancer. Dave Semenko has passed away. And so with the memory of this legendary Edmonton Oiler, one of the most legendary Oilers of all time, one of the most legendary dynasty players of all time, one of the guys most fondly remembered. And the Edmonton Oilers the next year in that 2017-2018 season, they don't even make the playoffs. And so there's the first one. And then you reel it forward a couple of years, and then what's the next thing that you have? This was a really devastating season. Colby Cave and Joey Moss, they both pass away during the 2020 season. Colby Cave so suddenly, actually, during the pandemic, like during that period of time when the team was basically off because the NHL was shut down, sustains a brain bleed and just he dies out of nowhere. And then when the NHL finally comes back, they came back to that play-in postseason format, where the Edmonton Oilers, they had to play a 5-game series against the Chicago Blackhawks. And so with the memories of Joey Moss and Colby Cave both draw inspiration from, the Edmonton Oilers, they came out pretty flat in that series. Won 1 game in that series, lost 3-1 to a team whose number they had had the entire season up to that point. So yeah, unfortunately, kind of a failure, a failure to get inspired. And then the next season, Walter Gretzky passes away. Like the penultimate hockey dad, in all of hockey history. Wayne Gretzky's dad passes away. And the team gets swept in the first round of the playoffs. Just could not seem to get inspired. Certainly at times it kind of felt like they couldn't seem to play like they were inspired. But now with Big Ben looking down, looking on, it really seems like a different story. For the first time in a very long time, I think that you could look at some of these games and you could say that the Edmonton Oilers are legitimately playing like they have been inspired. Like they have something to play for beyond just their own success. And really, who could possibly ask for more? I mean, not even just in terms of the way that he has inspired this team to play, but even just as an example of a fan. Ben Stelter, I think, has actually been the MVP of the last several weeks of this season. There's no question about it. And if you need a good example of that, look no further than, I believe it was after Game 4. And so up to this point, up until Game 4 in LA, the Stelter family, they hadn't managed to make it to a game because they were on this long-planned family vacation to Disneyland. It's, no comment on the timing of it. It is what it is. A kid going through what Ben Stelter's going through. Yeah, I think the family priority should definitely be to get that kid to Disney World. Pardon me, Disneyland. No, I forget because this is in LA. But after that Game 4 loss, I think so far it has, there are other images that people have kind of latched onto as iconic of this playoff run, but I think that this one actually, it is, or at least it should be considered the most iconic. That photo of Ben Stelter hugging Connor McDavid and consoling him after that loss and telling him, don't worry, you'll get the next one. Something like that. Probably not his exact words. But this kid, 5 years old, fighting for his life, against a pretty, what can be a very overwhelming foe. And he's in there consoling the team to make sure that they feel better about that loss so that they can focus on winning the rest of the series. That 5-year-old kid has more emotional maturity in his pinky finger than a lot of grown-ass adult fans that I've seen that I saw over that period of time. Game 4 and Game 5. You know, all the people that were still clinging to this this kind of weird little psychological tick that a lot of Oilers fans have, that they really seem to some of them really seem to pump their own egos, you know, by dumping on the players that they don't like, or dumping on the players that somehow they don't think are good enough. You know, but these are all adults. These are all grown-ups. And to be outdone in that department by a 5-year-old kid, you know, even one as extraordinary and exceptional as Ben Stelter, I think should leave a lot of them pretty embarrassed. But you know what? That was never the point of this particular podcast segment. I don't want to really make too many more of these where I'm dumping on certain segments of the fans anymore. What I really want to focus in is like just the way that this team has evolved. I can't remember exactly who it was that said it, but over the past day or so, I did see a quote somewhere, and somebody said that what we have witnessed in games 6 and 7 was the most evolved hockey player in the world, Connor McDavid, evolving again before our eyes. And if this seeming new ability to get inspired is what that new evolution is, I think that's the kind of thing that under the right circumstances could make Connor McDavid potentially unstoppable. And it's a thing that actually makes me more confident about this playoff run than I ever have been before. And make no mistake about it, I think that this is a team that can go deep. I thought that from the very beginning. But now I do think that, you know, if the stars align just right, I think that this is a team that maybe could go all the way and really could do something that not very many people expect them to. And if they do, I think that Ben Stelter is going to be the guy that a lot of fans should look to and give a lot of credit for that, because he's really helped this team, you know, clear what I consider to be a very vital hurdle and make them better than they ever have been before.